Okay, hey everyone, thank you for joining us once again for what is going to be our ninth Sochology Eduseries session. My name is Mudassir Bungish. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please mute yourself during the session. We absolutely love getting questions all the time since it creates a fantastic dialogue and we learn a lot more too, right? So please type them into the chat and we'll bring them up during the session towards the end of the session. Super excited for today's topic and for today's speaker. Topic is building strong product stories with data, and we've got Reham Fawad. She is a former coworker, a great friend, and a great product leader. She's been leading product for the last 15 years. Has global experience in building product portfolios for Fortune 500 companies, big tech, fintech, healthcare organizations, amongst others. She pioneers using data and empathy to solve customer problems and has led the delivery of several successful digital products that have earned recognition in industry publications such as Gartner and won various innovation awards. Um, Lately, she's also the founder of a nonprofit affinity group for Muslim women in product, where she's leading initiatives to upskill and empower Muslim women to thrive in product management careers and shape the products of tomorrow. So, Reham, very, very warm welcome. Super happy to have you and really excited to see what's in store for us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Mudassar, and Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thanks, Mudassar, for such a humbling introduction. Hi, everyone. I am looking forward to our session today and having a great conversation with you all. Before I start, I just want to make sure if you guys can see my screen. Mudassar, all good?
Yeah, yeah, I'll enable
Okay.
that. There we go.
Perfect. Thank you. So before I kind of get into things, Mudassar has done an amazing job introducing me. So I just wanted to get a little bit more personal and add some color to Reham's life, right? So I actually started off wanting to become surprisingly an optometrist till I realized computers were more
Interesting.
fun to
I
operate
never
on.
knew that. Yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of the stuff Mudassar is going to have an aha moment as well. So then in university, I wanted to be an animator till I realized, honestly, linear algebra, not my cup of tea. So I ended up graduating as a computer scientist, just in time, of course, for that dot-com bubble to burst in our faces. At which point, a lot of my friends went into masters, some became chartered accountants, and I ended up going into the workforce into business analysis. And the reason I did that, now that I think about it looking back, is because that one user requirements course that I took in university was by far one of my most favorite courses, because I loved the art of telling stories and writing so much that actually several of my profs thought I would actually end up going in journalism someday. So it hasn't happened yet. And because I've always been a listener helper type of personality, which has given me the privilege of working at some of the most amazing companies that you see on the screen right now, right? So typically these companies have had at least around 70% share of the entire market for their respective industries. And so, they've been pretty much the definition of thought leadership. And I've led a lot of amazing product people along the way. So I love talking about product. I love talking about the discipline, the tricks of our trade, and everything in between. So, here I am. Here I am today. All through my journey so far, and I've met many people that have just wondered how, those product managers that talk, and you're just so mesmerized by them, the whole room is mesmerized by them. Have you ever wondered how they actually do that? I think a huge part of it is actually because they're constantly telling captivating stories, and they're just so interesting to listen to because they add so much color into what they're saying. And they actually really believe and internalize everything that they're talking about in their story, right? They take you on this journey that's so colorful, it's so compelling, and they create this picture of greatness with their product always. So today, I wanted to go on that journey together with you all and talk about how you can create compelling product stories that actually sell. So I love this quote by Steve Jobs, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. It's a pretty famous one. But I love this quote about how storytellers are setting the future for the world, right? And if you really think about it, being a storyteller is actually an incredible privilege. And we as product managers really need to internalize that, right? Work from a place of having this privilege and big responsibility because it's critical to the core of what we do as product people, right? Because the thing is, guys, making mind-blowing products is barely about the products as much as we would like to think it's about the jiras and the releases that we do.
Yeah.
It's not really about that, right? It's about how powerful you are going to make people feel. Again, not because of the product, but because it lets them do something that they've been trying to do for a while, right? So it's about making people feel delighted and more productive in their daily lives. So mind-blowing products, in my opinion, are about how they make people feel all the right feels, right? So what is the storytelling that Steve Jobs talks about, right? That sets the vision for the future. Storytelling at its core, and even if you take products out, storytelling, just general art of storytelling at its core is kind of like taking this blank canvas, right? And adding vivid descriptions of experiences, adding color that's going to evoke powerful emotions into your audience, right? Stories impact us on an emotional level, and I think we all know that as humans, emotions are what motivate us to act most of the time. Now if you compare that with actual products, that's what successful products are, right? They're all about enticing experiences. They're all about enticing call to actions. And if you can get the users of your product hooked to the story enough that they get invested to return for more each time, you've got a winner, right? So between these two definitions, do you kind of see where I'm going? Emotions are involved, experiences are involved, motivations are involved, right? And so this actually reminds me of LinkedIn's top most in-demand soft skills for the year. Google it, guys. At the top, you've got communication and emotional intelligence, right? So communication is all about how do you get buy-in for your products from your stakeholders, whether those are external customers or their internal leadership team, C-suite, whoever that may be. And emotional intelligence is all about empathy, right? Listen and empathize, seek to understand before being understood, right? Understand the needs and pain points of the stakeholders you are delivering your story to so that it informs your product decisions and strategies going forward. And both of these skills that LinkedIn has rated at the top, communication and emotional intelligence, are actually core to our topic today. When Apple released its iPhone 12 Pro, and I pick iPhone 12 Pro because that's the one I have right now. But when it released its iPhone, it could have gone out with an ad like this: "Hey world, iPhone 12 Pro, we've got a new camera. It's great for the night mode. Come try us out." You know, and sure, the camera was a big part of their product story at that point. Sure, it mattered, right? Sure, your product features matter, your fast response times, your competitive differentiators, your affordable pricing, quick ROI, and whatever else. They do matter, but the thing is that they are not the end, right? This camera was not the end for Apple. It was just a means to the end.
Mhm.
The end was actually the end goal their audience was wanting to accomplish, right? So really the ad that Apple went out with for iPhone 12 Pro was this. This was their end. We want to help you world become filmmakers. We want to help you become movie makers. And so you notice in thought leaders like Apple and other successful companies and product companies out there is they build a strong, really strong emotional connection with their customers that then gives them a huge, unbreakable, loyal kind of customer base, right? Like if you, like, so I'm an Apple user. If you ask me to switch from Apple, my husband uses a Samsung, I'm not going to switch, right? Because they
Yeah.
have me emotionally hooked for whatever good or bad reasons, right? So you'll notice a lot of your successful products doing that, really building a story that emotionally connects deep with your customers' feelings. So really your story then is your vision and your core value proposition for the product, right? It's the intersection between your brand, your experience, and your product, right? And this is broader than your feature or your user stories, right? Those are not the kind of stories that I'm talking about. That's the means to the end, right? This is your holistic sort of product story. What does your product stand for? What's that one value at a 360-degree view that it's going to deliver to make your customers successful, right? So there was a study done a few months ago that talked about how top performing product managers actually help increase company profits by more than 34%. So hiring managers, if you're listening, for you.
Yeah,
If
we
you're
don't
looking
get paid enough then, right? If it's 34%, I did not know that. That's a pretty
that,
cool stat.
yeah, I was amazed as well. And if you're looking to
Yeah.
get into a job, this is how you get your hiring manager's ear. So the study talks about the thing that they all have in common is that they use incredible product stories as the single truth to move every product thing that they do forward, right? They'll wrap their strong value propositions into these compelling narratives that sell externally, internally, and everywhere in between, right? They're always on show. And they really internalize again the privilege that they have by being able to tell these stories, right? So everything you do as a product manager, you need to be storytelling. Whether you're doing your go to market, right? Your messaging for your customers, tell a compelling story. Whether you're building business cases internally for your leadership teams, you need to tell them a story, right? Whether you're taking your dev teams through your software development life cycles, you need to always be telling the story, and the story should be the same so that they kind of come along with you, right? Same for road shows that you may go on with your sales teams or conferences you may go or do for your customers. You need to constantly tell your stories. And again, you can use this at all levels. If you're starting off in product, if you're a senior product manager, if you're at the director, product leader sort of level, you can always be telling your stories. And it's vital that you do to be successful in what you are doing today. So let's get into how do you actually build these stories. So I believe there are two parts to a successful story, especially for the product. Hello, right side of the brain, right? So this is the first part. This is where you want to engage the creative, emotional, feely, touchy-feely type of part of the brain for your customers, right? And so if you cannot wrap everything your product is standing for in a captivating this is why type of narrative for your customers, you're probably just going to be another fish in yet another sea, right? Your customers are trying to find answers to their problems and navigate their worlds better. So as a product manager, it's our job to uncover that why that's going to drive them, motivate them, and you need to build that into your narrative, right? A compelling story is going to strengthen not only your customer's relationship with your product, but with you. And you really want that strong companionship with your product to really make things successful and be a successful product manager at the end of the day. Now, the second step you're going to do is engage their analytical brain, right? When you attach credible data to your story, your stakeholders, customers, C suite leadership, whoever your audience is, they're going to be more inclined to trust the message that you're putting out there. And honestly trust you, right? So this is going to help build credibility. And if you really think about it, data is also a form of visualization, right? So, and we all know pictures speak 1,000 words. So when you start adding visualization to your story, it really helps their um, grab their attention and their understanding of what you're trying to tell them. So by combining both the narrative and the data, you're effectively aiming for both sides of your stakeholders' brain and really reinforcing and hitting home the information you're trying to tell them, right? So step one is going to guide them through the data, and step two is going to provide support to the narrative of your why, right? So it gives you the best of both emotional and analytic experiences as you're engaging and captivating your audience into the story that you want them to buy into. At the end of the day, this is all about selling your product story and getting buy-in for it, right? So let's double click into these steps and kind of see how can you start doing that today. So the first step, right, I don't think they should come as a surprise. This is all about your why. Anything we do as product people needs to always connect back to the why. I was reading an article by Juan Ramirez. He's actually a product lead at Netflix, and he talks about how product is again 80% understanding the why, and just 20% actually building it, right? So our value as product managers comes from understanding our stakeholders' motivations and building a story around it. What is the problem that you're trying to solve for your customers? And once you figure out the problem, you need to then figure out what is, by solving that problem, what's the value you want to add to their lives. That's sort of what becomes your why and your narrative in step one. And again, I don't mean the kind of why that ends up as, hey, our why is we want customers to complete workflow XYZ faster.
Mhm.
That's tactical, that's a bit minutia. This is even more high level to that, right? So I mean the kind of why that ends up saying, hey, our why is we want people to be able to spend more time with family. We want people to be amazing filmmakers, right? So there's a difference if you
Yeah.
notice in those types of whys.
Yeah, it's very powerful. Yeah, I think the second instance that you gave. It's like it's almost the start of a story, right? The start of a story that you're about to tell, rather than
Exactly.
just focusing on, well, we gained X efficiency. So, um,
Exactly.
great theme. Yeah,
Exactly. And you're exactly right, Mudassar. It's the start of the story. It's not that your story is not going to then have chapters and sentences you're going to talk about. You will, but your
yeah,
start needs to be so engaging that you've got people listening. Because honestly, right now in the world we live today, we are competing. Everything, apps, everything, content is competing for our attention. So whichever grabs your attention the best is the one that gets to win here, right?
right.
So you really want to tap into something in your audience's emotion, so which is going to be your target sort of persona for your products, by uncovering a ripple effect symptom of their day-to-day activities. So you need to touch something very deep in customer emotion with your why. And I'm not going to lie, this is sort of the subjective part. This comes with practice. So there is a point here in this exercise in step one where you need to trust your instincts and work from a place of true empathy. I think if you work from a place of true empathy, you will be successful. Trust yourself and trust the fact that product managers are actually great listeners. We would not be in product managers if we sucked at listening, right? We would not be successful as product
Yeah,
managers.
100%.
So really love listening to people's stories, right? Listen to their triumphs, their struggles, everything in between, because usually it's in those in between conversations with customers that you're going to get to what keeps them up at night type of a thing, right? So this is what makes their world colorful. It's what makes them human, right? So listen to them and trust and believe that you can actually solve people's problems, because you're going to lend an ear. That's all you need to do at the end of the day. Lend an ear, listen, 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 listen. You'll figure out what the trend is. So where do you build this instinct from, though, right? How do you uncover your why? So I want to give a couple of tips. The first one, not a shock. Nothing ever in the world, ever in your life as a product manager, will replace direct conversations with customers. A long time ago, I took this training by Pragmatic Marketing, and there was, out of the whole training, one thing that really stuck with me was this quote that my instructor had said at that point, which was, "Your opinion, dear product manager, although interesting, is irrelevant." Right? So your opinion, your boss's opinion, your friend product manager's opinion, interesting but irrelevant till the customers have the same opinion, right? So talk to your customers and really build that relationship with them. Have on-site meetings if you can. If you cannot, have online meetings, Zoom, whatever you guys use, right? If you're going to conferences that are on a topic, on an industry type of topic, find your customers that are also going to the same conference and talk to them, sit with them for lunch and just have a conversation with them. If your sales teams are going on road shows and you're accompanying them, again, talk to your customers, right? Talk to your customers outside the script prepared for the specific venue that you are talking to them at, right? Because you want to really make them feel personal and have that experience of, you're their friend, you really are listening, you actually want to help them out. And always, always listen, even if your customers are talking about some other topic, right? Even if they're not talking about the topic you initially started the conversation on,
Yeah,
listen to them. because that's, again, in my experience, that's where the biggest whys uncover themselves. It's not going to be on, hey customer, what are you struggling with today, and they go off. They're usually not going to tell you your ultimate why in that specific conversation. I think, Mudassar, you and I have been on several customer conversations and calls, right, where it's like, that's not even the question we asked them, but hey, thanks
Yeah,
for letting us know because this is what we need to do for you, right?
yeah, absolutely. And one thing I'll add to that, those customer calls that we've had, I've had instances where it hasn't clicked at that time for me, right? What they're trying to say, because they're not being explicit about it. But later on, when you kind of go through your notes and you ruminate over it, and you have a couple more conversations, that thread that you picked up starts making more sense. And you have like a bit of an aha moment, and you start exploring that, right? So
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had a customer conversation once many years ago, and this customer was talking about, hey, you guys don't let us export your report in an Excel. We want an Excel version of it, right? And so I started having this conversation of them around your five whys, right? I was like, why do you want an Excel? Oh, because we want to print it. Why do you want to print it? Oh, because we want to fill this XYZ thing in. Okay, why do you want to do that? Because we want to take it to some meeting. Oh, what's this meeting about? You tell me. Oh, it's a meeting with our board of directors we have every quarter. Okay, and so you print it out and do what? Pass it around? Yeah, we just pass it around because, we have no other way of sharing. We don't have a projector in the screen. Okay, that's interesting. Hey, I wonder, do you guys use tablets? Oh yeah, all of our most of the people in the meeting have tablets. And so that's like, it's uncovering. So they don't need per se an Excel version of your report. They need to be able for their C-suite to understand the data in your report. So how do you enable that, right? So again, this is a little bit not at the highest level of your why, but that's sort of another example of how you keep asking, keep asking, keep asking, because usually the first
yeah.
pain point your customers tell you is a symptom of a, of a deeper pain that exists within their processes or companies or whatever that may be. So the second bullet here, right, that I want to talk about is setting up avenues that give you sort of continuous access to customer intel, right? We all know talking to customers is amazing. Yes, we should be talking to them, but we don't always get the chance to be direct with them, right? What's your second best option? Your customer facing teams, they are your BFFs. Really, really befriend them. Talk to them. I'm talking about your internal market leaders, your internal sales teams, your pre sales teams, right? Your implementers, your consultants, if that's the way your sort of business is set up, your support teams, your internal subject matter experts. Really talk to these people and understand their triumphs and struggles, right? So, for example, for a sales team, go up to your salesperson and say, hey, how can I help you hit your sales quota? And sales teams are amazing. They're going to give you a long list of why the product doesn't work or what the customer is frustrated with. And you'll start uncovering the trends in the kind of things you hear internally, right? So really, really talk to your customer facing teams and do it on a cadence. Don't just do it as a one-off thing because you need to deliver something, but do it on a cadence with them. And then the third one here is, feedback. So we are great as product managers getting enhancement requests for customers and then storing it somewhere and then reviewing it and saying, sure, we'll add it to our roadmap, which by the way is the I'll start going to the gym in January for product managers, right? Yeah, okay, it's going on the roadmap. Hum nahi karne wale. Like we don't have that.
Exactly.
So never forget when you're trying to build your why to go back to these requests from your customers, right? So if you use things like Salesforce, Delight, Jira, whatever your tool is to record customer enhancements, go back constantly and look at them, right? Look at the new ones that come in. If you are new on a product, look at all the feedback that was put in so far for your product that you have just been given, right? Understand the trends and the kind of pains that exist with the customers. And again, I've done this for my products and it has been so extremely helpful. I cannot tell you. It's painful. It's tactical. I agree. It will require a lot of work on your part to just read through stuff. But at the end, the kind of insight you'll come out with it is going to be amazing, right? So do these three things. And as you are doing them, what I cannot stress enough, and I will a few times as we're going through our conversation today, is socialize. everything you learn, conversations you have, things you learn, trends, insights, whatever, socialize it constantly, internally and externally. Because what happens with that is you start having conversations, and conversations uncover truths. And that's the why that you're after, right? So the
Yeah.
thing with the why also is that there are two sides to it. You could either do this externally for your customers. You're always going to do this externally, right? Like for your customers, figure out all of that. But there are also going to be points in time where you want to do this internally for your executive leadership, for your business case sort of audience, right? So even in these scenarios, all of the above that we just talked about the customer, it applies. This is the muscle that will get revenue into your business. And honestly, that's what the business cares about, is getting revenue in from your customers, right? So
Yeah.
knowing your customer inside out, knowing them like your daughter or someone like that is not going to get old. So really know your customer. Now the
Yeah.
second one,
Hey,
when you try, yeah.
sorry, Ram, we had a question come in for the last slide, the 2 points you specifically mentioned about listening, right? I'm just going to display it now. So Hamad Anwar asks, when listening, how do you differentiate the signal from noise? Any framework suggestions or tips or anything?
Yeah, I think the biggest framework I would suggest when listening is the type of questions you're asking. It's very important that as product managers, we do not ask leading questions, right? You don't want to ask someone, hey, are you struggling with using the camera or something along those lines, right? You want to ask them open-ended questions of, hey, when you take pictures, how does that work out for you? Just open-ended questions so that they can take the conversation wherever they want them to, rather than you kind of leading them. The other sort of tip that I would give here is ask constant whys. Seldom are you going to get your signal in your first why as the answer of your first why, right? And you will know, again, because some of this is subjective, there's going to be a point where you know you've asked enough whys to get to that point in the customer conversation, because you yourself are going to have an aha moment and think, oh, I didn't realize they were doing a quarterly thing with their leadership, and there's a pain
Hmm.
point that exists there because they are not being put forward in a positive image in front of this leadership team, right? So you'll know where that deep pain exists. So continue asking why till you have that aha moment. And that's what I meant is trust your instinct, because I think as product people, what we're good at, and I believe that every product manager is just listening and knowing where it's like, oh, okay, I get what the real pain is. So I think those are the two tips I would give as you're trying to listen and just separate out the signal from the noise. That is a really good question, because I have a couple slides down on additional sort of tips on how you separate those two, and that should help you kind of just get to that level of
Okay.
understanding for your
Perfect.
customer.
Thank you, Ram.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so what I was talking about is internally, knowing your customer doesn't get old. What I would recommend you also do when you're trying to build your internal why for your whatever internal audience is really understand the information and the intel you have internally around people that promote your products, people that don't promote your products, and really those observers, those passive people. Honestly, they have a lot to say. And a lot of time they're passive because they're frustrated because you're not solving their ultimate pain point. So really understand them, right? So how do you do this? If your company is one of those amazing companies that does NPS scoring for your customers, look at that data, understand that data, and double click and really try to figure out why that data is skewing a certain way. Win-loss analysis reports, I think, are amazing to look at, because that really helps you understand why you are either retaining or not retaining your customers. So there is reasoning in there as well. So win-loss with that sort of, befriending your sales team and having conversations with them. Same thing for support, right? Look at trends in your support teams department, volume, calls, type of tickets, right? Try
Yeah.
understanding that. And I think
Support. Yeah.
support is a big one, right? Mudassar,
It
I
has
feel
been
even,
clutch. Yeah. For me, quite a bit in a lot of situations.
yeah, support is huge. And even implementation, I think, is really big, because when someone has signed on and they're ready to go live, but you have this process of implementation, you want to hear where the issues are happening there, because that's their initial interaction with your product, and so you want to understand, was the time to value fast enough for your customers or actually not. So this is kind of around, if you have data in production as well that you can get your hands off, right? So if your DevOps team can run some sort of script to get you some trends for production type of data, start doing
Mhm.
that as well. So really look at this sort of category of information. And the most important when you're doing this internally is always align with your company's visions and objectives, right? You always, everyone in the company is working towards the same objective. At least I hope they are, right? So that's at least what we hope we do, right? And so when you build your stories that say, hey, I'm going to help my company deliver this objective and make them be successful by doing this and move the needle for them, then you've really got people listening to you internally, right? So, for example, if your company's objective is impacting revenue, which a lot of times it is, you want to talk to people like your finance team, really understand what your revenue generation is like, what your profit and loss is, right? Talk to your product operations teams if you have those as well, because they're very good with kind of just giving you insights into, again, revenue financial type of information. So start really aligning yourself with the overall objective of the company, either for the fiscal year or long term, and then build your stories. Okay, so now at this point, right, you figured out your why. You have this enticing narrative around how you're going to delight your stakeholder, which is the ultimate value that you're going to deliver for them, right? You've activated their emotional side of the brain, and they're really listening because emotions are involved at this point, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that right side, we completed that of the
Exactly.
brain.
So,
Cool.
so where do you go from here? So I actually really love this quote by Brene Brown, and I use it a lot of times to remind myself, to remind the teams, whatever the case may be, because I think it conveys two messages. The first one is that we need to make our stories soulful so that they sell, right? We need to turn them into data stories. And data storytelling is another buzzword happening in the market nowadays, if you guys want to Google after. So, for
Mhm.
example, if I told you there aren't a lot of women in product management careers, you might react with, oh, well, or, sucks for you, Reham, and move on to the next thing competing for your attention in the world. But if I told you, and this is a fact, that we live in a world where only 30% of all global product managers are women, out of which hardly 1% are Muslim women, you're going to listen harder because I just added color with context now. Particularly, I think I've piqued the interest of the women listening to this right now because they're probably having aha moments and are like, oh, no wonder I don't see any other women next to my desk at work, right? And to tell
Mhm.
you the truth, that's my audience. The ones that really want listening to my story are listening because I put this data element in there. So back your stories with data. And then the second thing I think this quote is trying to convey is the realization that the best way for you to even get to your why, so your step one in why, is actually through the extraction of data, right? It's the data really that informs your next strategic move for the product, your next strategic move as a product manager. Where do you take your product 5 years from now, 5 months from now, whatever the case may be for you, right? And
Mhm.
by the way, this is especially useful, I think, for stories based on internal data, because that's like proprietary data, right? That only you have access to, your competitors don't. So you can really tell a story that no one else can about your industry and customers if you really, really leverage data in the right way.
Yeah, that's when we were talking about support. I mean, they were able to provide me NetSuite tickets and data from that, and that was absolutely invaluable for me going in for the C-suite and pitching, what we're doing. And the data, like you said, tells the story. So love this.
Exactly, exactly. Especially when you're pitching to the C-suite and leadership, they just love data, right?
Mm.
Like there's no
Yeah,
way to convince that level of leadership than than data because it'll
yeah,
really resonate with them because that's what they're, at the end of the day, that's what they care about the most.
yeah. Very cool.
So how do you accessorize your why with data, right? So, now that you're kind of sold on the fact that data storytelling is going to enable you to communicate your sort of valuable insight in your product stories, let's talk about how we do it, right? So this step is all about conveying what success is going to look like, right? So if your why says that you're going to help people save time, quantify it for them. How much time? 5 minutes? 50 minutes? Maybe a full day? Which, by the way, are you saying it's a long weekend every weekend? Now we're talking.
Amazing.
Now they're hooked, right? They're going to really listen now because that's what you want. You want your stakeholders' ear, their trust, that this like personal connection with them of credibility, right? So this is what this part is about, really conveying what success is going to look like, not for you, for your audience. What is that success going to look like? And to do that, you need to really understand your customer journey, right? It's vital that you understand what your customers are going through from the first point of sale. So them talking to sales, all the way to them implementing, if that's your process, to them getting value out of your product, and then to them returning for more or them not returning for more. Really, really deeply understand what that journey for your customers look like. Because when you do that, that's what's going to help you actually measure what matters the most and drive customer value. And again, this can be, you can apply it to external audiences, you can apply it for internal audiences. You guys are smart enough, you know how to use this for whatever works for you, but these are kind of the tips that I would share. And then in the end, I'm going to repeat it: socialize. Don't hoard information, guys. Just socialize. Great conversations happen when you socialize. And I bring this a lot because I think this was one of my biggest learnings as I was kind of moving towards the product leadership role, was just, it's so important to socialize, and successful product managers are always socializing what they learn because they share the information. Sharing is caring, and nothing but good comes out when you kind of share goodness with the world, basically, right? So so what I want to do is I want to actually just share a framework that I typically have used to build this data for stories. And this framework sort of has 3 steps to it. The first step is your North Star, right? Think of this as the title of your book. What is your book about? The whole book. What is it about? So holistic, ultimate, final objective or value prop that you're trying to deliver here. The next step from here that you want to do is figure out your influencers. Think of these as the chapters of your books, right? What are the categories of things that make up the final title of the book or the actual story that you're trying to build here? And for those specific chapters, you want to figure out what are the sentences within these chapters, right? What are the different things that are impacting how this chapter is basically made up? So let's double click into this a little bit. So for your North Star, right? Again, this is your golden thread, your ultimate truth that is going to run through every single thing you do as a product manager with your product, right? It is often subconscious because it is usually something that keeps them up at night. So again, in your first why that you ask them, they're not probably going to tell you what your North Star needs to be. Continue asking, figure it out, figure out what keeps them up at night, right? So I have a couple of examples here, right? So if you're, for example, a company that makes audit software, right? Maybe for you, your North Star is you want to decrease the number of penalties your customers are getting dinged with, right? Or maybe if you are an instant messaging app, right? So I use Teams at work. Maybe you guys I use Slack sometimes too. Maybe you guys use Slack, Google Hangouts, whatever. Maybe for a product like that, the gold star, the North Star would be the number of messages that are sent, right? Similarly, something like YouTube, probably number of videos that are uploaded, right? Amount of revenue generated would be a very good North Star for someone like Visa or PayPal, right? And then internally, if you're trying to do this, your North Star typically a lot of time ends up being around revenue, right? So that's the bit about, increase your monthly recurring revenue or your annually recurring revenue by a certain percentage, right? So that's your ultimate goal that you're trying to get at. So then what you do with the influencers is, again, this is also not about one particular thing. It's sort of this funnel of like sub objectives or goals that the users are going to have to reach the final sort of objective, right? The key thing here is you want to separate the signal from the noise, right? So you want 2 or 3 max here. I think if you're starting off in product, because this needs practice and constant reiteration, maybe you can go for 5, but don't do more than 5, because you'll just get lost in noise then, right? So aim for 3ish. That's kind of, I think, a good number to get 3 sort of influencer metrics, 3 sort of influential workflow type of things that your customer journey sort of includes, that will get them to the final North Star, right? So again, maybe for that audit company, if their North Star is that they want to decrease the number of penalties, perhaps an influencer is they want to increase the number of account reconciliations done through their product, right? For example, so it's building up that, hey, if I reconcile more, then I'll be penalized less type of a thing, right? Same for internally, if your thing is for your company to increase your monthly recurring revenue, then perhaps your influencers would be decreasing the churn ratio, right, for your customers, or decreasing the time to value so that more people adopt, and then you get more revenue type of a thing.
Right.
So
So you've got
this,
multiple influencers that are kind of pushing
exactly,
you towards your North Star. Cool.
yeah,
Sorry, go on.
exactly. And I think this is the category where you've got things like adoption rates, time to value, retention rates, right? Are people simply interacting or actually engaging sort of with your workflow? So those are the kind of things you would keep here. And then the last one is basically everything at the story and epic level is the easiest way to say this. I think that will resonate, right? So because these are your sentences, remember that there are more sentences than there are chapters, than there are titles in a book, right? So this, I think, as product managers, typically for some reason ends up being our comfort zone, because it's like data heaven, right? Like anything and everything under the sun, right? It's the level with the most number of metrics, because this is going to include your where and your what. So your where is basically where are your users spending time within your product. So, pages, screens, things like those. And your what is what are your users actually interacting with in your product. So your buttons, your links, your features, feature functionality type of stuff. That's what is included in here. And so you want to be careful that even at this level, try your best to not track every single button, because while that is very enticing, it's just going to end up in being vanity metrics, right? Metrics that you look at and you're like, well, that's nice, but now how do you change that, right? So a lot of times companies look at, okay, the amount of traffic to a specific page. That's nice to look at the amount of traffic to a specific page, but if you look at it in isolation, what is that really telling you? 50 people coming to your site, what is that really telling you? So, if you can move the needle with a metric that you're tracking, a data point that you're looking at,
Yeah.
probably something you need to filter out. So again, this is at the story and epic level, and some examples here are, typical, your daily active users. I think things that we are most familiar with, right? Like the number of clicks, the number of time spent on a specific feature, things like those.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, Ram, we had a question come in. We're okay taking that, and then we'll look at time to make sure if we got time for one more. If not, I think this is still a good one. What are some effective ways to turn customer feedback, interviews, or other information into a compelling story and evidence for prioritizing next steps? Are there any specific techniques that have been successful for you? And it says, goes on, this is especially helpful for guiding product managers and setting clear priorities for the future, right? So, um, all the feedback that you're getting from customers, what's, I guess, the question I'm asking, like, what is one way to condense it and then think about your next step, right? And can you maybe take some of that feedback and slot it in any of these categories?
yeah, absolutely can. So when you're talking to customers, don't talk to one, right? Talk to a few customers. So as you
Mhm.
talk to a few customers, you will, and I have zero doubt in this, by the way, as you talk to a few of your customers, you'll start noticing similar things that all of them are saying. So you'll start noticing the common threads between them. So you start narrowing in on those common threads, right? So your customer talked about 50 things, but between your 5 customers, all talked about like these 4 things that in some way or another about what was keeping them up at night, right? So really hone in on that. And then in your follow-up conversations with your customers, talk about just those 4, right? Help them to help you double click into what those 4 are and really figure out where that pain point exists. Because I think when you start doing
Mhm.
that, you use that to then prioritize, right? On your end, what do you really need to build for them for MVP versus phase 2 versus phase 10, right? So that's how you start then taking that and prioritizing. And then you couple that with the data that you look at, right? Like the usage, the adoption rates on the specific, what are you doing currently in the product? And if what you're doing, is it sticky? Is it retaining people? Are you churning, right? So put those two together and then start prioritization, because then that framework actually helps you prioritize. Does that answer, Mudassar? I didn't get the last part, I think, of the question, but I think I answered it.
Yeah, no, I think that is what the question was asking. It makes a lot of sense, right? Asked about effective ways to turn that feedback into a compelling story, and the way you described it is kind of look at the patterns that you're seeing, condense that, and then
Yeah.
follow that lead, right? And then obviously back it up with data. So that's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, carry on. That's great
Yeah.
question, by the way.
And I think a lot of times as product managers, we worry about what if we don't find that trend, right? What if we have these 50 conversations and we don't find a trend? Guys, it's never once happened to me that I've never found a trend in customer conversations. So just have them. Let fear not rule you. Have those customer conversations. You will see the trend. I have zero doubt in my mind, because you will see a trend. There is a reason your organization is doing something specific. So you will see a trend. Just, it takes muscle, it takes practice. So just continue doing that. So the only last thing I wanted to add here was just tips, right? My first tip is beware analysis paralysis, right? One of the top trends for 2023, guys, is minimalism. So really practice minimalism with this data stuff that I have here, right? Less is more. You want to build top down. Start with your North Star and not bottom up, because you will absolutely get lost in noise, right? If you think about like an essay you've ever written, or maybe a PowerPoint you've ever done, it has been always easier to get a PowerPoint from 10 to 100 slides than take that 100-point PowerPoint and get it out to 10 for your leadership. It's impossible almost, right? It takes too much time. So always start with your North Star and sort of double click and build down. And again, you want one North Star. You don't even want 5 North Stars, guys. Focus on one thing. You want one North Star. Under it, you want 3, max 5 if you're fairly new at this, influencers. And then below it, track whatever you need to really figure out those top 2 levels, right? Now, the stage of the product that you're managing is also relevant, right? Are you a new product? Are you a growth or a mature product, right? So for someone like a growth product, or even mature, you also want a baseline, right? So if you look at that example under North Star, increase MRR by X% or Y%, right? You want a baseline, and you will have the data from existing customers to figure out what your baseline is, because that's what's going to make your data point really strong. On the contrary, if you are managing a new product, right, it's probably more about achieving X% of the market share or booking a certain amount of revenue, right? More than like growing a specific North Star metric, this is more about like getting a share of something initially, and then you grow it. So really be mindful of the stage of the product that you are managing, right? And then again, socialize with your team. Don't hoard, socialize. A lot of times when we share these data points, great conversations happen, especially internally, because something you don't know, someone else knows, and they will chime in when you start socializing and telling what you found out. So there's another buzzword going around in the market. It's called product-led growth. So, and I really encourage you to read up on product-led growth metrics, because I think there is a lot of value for us as product managers to really sort of follow that trend. And then the one thing that I want to wrap up with is, acknowledge and respect that there is diversity in your customer base. One size is never going to fit all of everyone, right? So focus on cohorts that are of most importance to your story, to your business, to your product, right? Segment by common characteristics. Do you want to look at people in Canada or just Pakistan? Do you want to look at a specific segment of your target market, or the whole thing, right? Do you want to look at just the new sort of customers that came on board in the last quarter, or all of them, right? So look out for trends then, not just in these specific cohorts that you figure out, but also between the cohorts, right? Is a specific cohort more sticky than another one, right? So it'll start helping you to measure the longer term value of your customers and just make things more actionable, because looking at one huge blob of thing is always harder to figure out where to go next than if it's more segregated and narrowed down. And if nothing else, when you cohort, you're going to get a list of people that you're going to pick up the phone and call and say, hey customer, how's your day going? What else has been keeping you up at night, right? So take it as an opportunity to talk to your customers constantly, right? Just always continue to do that. And so then, if you use these frameworks, those two steps, the last question I think in my mind, perhaps some of you may be wondering, is what kind of tools do you use? So I just wanted to put up a report that Gartner did recently around just the top sort of tools to kind of capture data for your products. Web analytics is something that's been around forever that I think almost everyone knows. This is where your Google Analytics and Adobe sort of analytics fall into place. It then grew into, I think, this category that's called product analytics, which really focuses on behavior of users and how to really keep them engaged. So, in here I've used Pendo, Amplitude, Gainsight. If any of those are something that you use, I think praises for that, or, whatever works for you. And then digital experimentation, which I think is also important, so I'll point it out, is all about when you're trying to do A/B testing. So this is again a little bit more tactical, but I did want to tell you guys about that. So if you want to do A/B testing, does a specific version of your app or whatever work more than another version of your app? These are the kind of tools you want to use is within this digital experimentation sort of category, and I've used Optimizely in here. And then your digital experience analytics on the left is more about diagnostic type of insights. So, if that's what you do and that's sort of where you're at within your company, that you may want to look at that, right? So basically to say that the product manager needs to look across all the touch points in the journey here. And so, you'll probably need to pick a couple of these tools to really make your data strong and strengthen that why and your narrative. So pick whatever works for you and start kind of collecting that data, right? Don't be scared. Just start collecting it. You'll figure it out as you go with more practice. So, just to recap, and I apologize, I'm rushing because I know we're getting out of time, but, just to recap, deeply understand your audience and your customers when you are telling your stories, right? Build your narrative around your why. Build your credibility by adding data to the story that you're telling. Cater to people that matter the most and use tools that works for your business. And never stop telling your stories, guys, because storytelling is a muscle, right? That needs to be worked constantly in order to be strengthened. So you got to take every opportunity to practice it, to edit it, to repeat it, to socialize it, right? And read your work out loud. Read it to your salesperson, read it to the person sitting next to you. If you don't like anyone at work, read it to people at home, right? It's easier to awkwardness and the voids in your stories when you're saying it out loud versus just reading it on paper, right? And always remember, I don't think I can stress this enough, we are all extremely privileged to be in a place where we can tell product stories for building the future. Think about that, internalize that, work from that sort of level of privilege and huge responsibility and empathy for whatever you do for product, right? So our job as product managers is to deliver joy, value, and results through our stories. Thank you, Mudassir, for giving me the opportunity to talk to your audience today and taking you guys on this journey.
Awesome. That was amazing, Reham. Especially the last bit. I think very humbling, right? It kind of brings you back down to earth. Is like, what is my ultimate goal and responsibility? And you are making a huge impact as a product leader in the world. I think
Absolutely.
sometimes your organization might not see it, your family might not see it, but you see it, and that's kind of the motivation to keep you moving forward. So, Rehan, thank you so much for joining the session. Apologies to you and the folks on the line for some of the technical difficulties we were having. You can find this stream on YouTube. So if you missed the first part, which was just as valuable as the last, you can go to our YouTube channel, Product Soch. You will also be able to go to our Sochcast and be able to see sessions there as well. So, but you can find the session on YouTube. So, Ram, thank you so much, and yeah, talk to you soon. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and have a great night, everyone in Pakistan. And if you're not, then have a good day.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.